here for 4 minutes and you and I just being oddly uncomfortable and awkward. That'd be awesome.
That's right. It happens. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Good morning. It's Hal Sparks Mornings, Megaworldwide. It's hump day. And so I'm bringing one of our favorite humps, a gentleman I've known for a long time, Christopher Titus. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure, sir.
I am so happy to be here, and it's good to see you. I haven't seen you look in a minute, so the rock and roll nerd Halen thing is taking over your life. Obviously.
Well, you know, honestly, nerd Halen, I have to put my
you just tossed your hair.
Yeah.
You just tossed your mane.
I did a full, I did a full share. I found someone. I have to put my hair back for nerd Halen. It would actually work better when it was short. Like it goes against type. But I started growing it during COVID, and I entered, fuck it land, and I'm leaving it there until no one offers me a show except something that involves Vikings or Jesus Christ. I'm not doing another series unless it involves preferably both.
By the way, that's a good crossover. Jesus shows up with the Vikings.
Right,
He leaves the apostles and just shows up. Guys, I can't deal with these guys. It's all about, what am I doing? I don't know if this is really real.
Yeah.
Can we just go kill something now? Because Jesus shows up with the Vikings for a rough weekend.
The Romans would be having a totally different path on that timeline. Talk about the Mandela effect.
Jesus brings back 12 new apostles.
Right, yeah. They're all extras from, whatever, Sons of Anarchy.
I'm so in on this already.
I like it. It seems like one of those movies that would get the Christopher Titus twist. I'm just saying.
100%.
Yeah. So, first of all, welcome. I am wearing, as many people will notice, if you see, my 7th Street entry First Avenue shirt, because you and I are both ginormous Prince fans. And
to the point of people hating us at times. To the point of just shut up. People just shut up. Like, no, I can't shut up. I have 9 gigs of Prince music, and you're going to hear about the deepest tracks we possibly know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you're going to hear why, like, Starfish and Coffee is like the feel-good song of the century. Sorry. Yeah. You just deal with it. And how
you're going to know exactly what the other side of Erotic City was. Erotic City was not even released as a single. It was the B-side. So...
Yeah, suck it up.
Yeah, it's annoying. Right? We can be really annoying, but when we get together, it's like Geek Fest. It's like, oh my god, my favorite album is, and it's weird. A lot of people say "Rave Into the Joy" Fantastic is not the best album, but I would say that
it's so cover to cover. That song, start to finish, one of the few albums you can play all the way through. That and Around the World in a Day.
And musicology, by the way, was just fuck you to everybody who said he only had one genre. Every song of that, totally different genre. So.
Yeah, he was like saying, "I'm the new Freddie Mercury. Deal with it," and I love him for that.
And he's saying that Prince doesn't sell records anymore. Well, I guess what Prince did. Prince actually would sell a ticket, and then he would give you an album at his concert. I got one, musicology, and so he was #1 on SoundScan for many, many months because of that. Right. He's a genius. Can we talk more?
And also the fact that he changed his name to a symbol, not because he was nuts, but because Warner Brothers owned every other iteration of his name. Yes. And it was a genius marketing ploy on a scale that I don't even think is appreciated to this day.
Yes, it had to be handled by the courts.
Fuck you. Yeah.
It is the biggest thing. And my favorite thing is my last thing, and then we're going to move on. One of the best things, people forget, he wasn't that he was a genius musician, but he was a genius, period. I'll never forget the story about when he did Most Beautiful Girl in the World. And he brought it to Warner Brothers and said, we want to release this. And Warner Brothers said, nah, we don't want to release it. You don't sell records anymore. So Prince said, well, do you mind if I release it? Because he was already doing the website stuff. I have the Crystal Ball album from the website. He releases it. It goes #1 in 58 countries.
Right.
It's just the fuck you that he got to drop on everybody constantly is beautiful.
Right. And every time they would write him out because times had changed or styles had changed or whatever, everybody was clamoring for the next, bit of what he was doing. It was almost like they did him a slight favor by being dicks because it just built more tension with the rest of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Hit and Run, man. There's, I think it's one of the last albums he did. I still listen. There's great stuff. I have playlists from different eras of Prince, and then so we'll stop. We'll stop now. We'll do a whole Prince
podcast. When the modern era of politics is over, and we no longer have to white knuckle our fucking government every day because it's gone back to its boring trend of like who's Yeah, the president, I guess he's okay. But who's in concert this weekend? When we go back to that, you and I will have a podcast where we do one Prince song every episode and fill an hour and a half on
for 30,000 episodes. That's
right.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
But going back to white knuckling politics, man, I have a question because you're always so smart. Like we talked yesterday, and I'm always your insight always gets to me. And you should, if you're tell everybody to listen to Hal because I don't understand the bullshit of the Democratic Party. Listen, whether Biden has a problem or not, why would everybody go public with it? All you're doing is putting the question and doubt in everybody's fucking mind. Listen, I don't mind if you gang up on him in the White House. I don't mind if you sit down and have a long talk with him. I don't mind if Obama comes in and has to talk to him but don't let us all know because now we're all scared out of our fucking minds and we were already scared out of our fucking minds. I don't understand.
Well, there's a theory to that, and I think it's because we on this side of the aisle tend to be cool with kicking the tires on stuff. We tend to be okay with opening up to everybody's opinion. That's the nature and the difficulty of being Democrats is that it is herding cats and you're open up to everything. And there has been for a long time with the whole fake news narrative and all that shit. We've seen a bunch of Republicans working the ref, Trump being primary amongst them, but not alone, that the media is in the tank and that there's some sort of Democratic elite that punted Bernie out, years ago, and that they've been coordinating behind the scenes. And so to fight that bullshit narrative, which is bullshit, everybody wants to is tripping over themselves to be more forthcoming than the next person. Like, let me just spill and be, have verbal diarrhea about my own personal honesty, about my own foibles, and which is fine if it's genuine. The problem is it allows the barnacles and the bottom feeders and the hammerheads that are in the party or that are around the party to see the feeding frenzy and go in and take a bite. From Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to Marianne Williamson to to Bennett, any of these folks, that's what they're doing. They're like, oh, I see an opening. Let me get the knives.
Then I'll say this. How often in life has that really worked out? We're telling everybody, every relationship I've ever been in, every friendship I've been in, you know what? There's some shit. Just shut the fuck up till it's worked out. Shut up till it's worked out. It's not worked out. Listen, if Joe Biden, after he's earned the right at this point to go to sit down with his wife, sit down with his family, sit down with Obama, sit down and figure out how bad off he really is. Look, he's 81. Whether he's perfect or not, he's 81. I get it. Listen, I mean, he should just wear an Ensure patch as a sponsorship all day long.
Sure.
But he's earned the right to sit there and go, okay, let's evaluate me. Let's sit down and evaluate. Because I think he's such an insightful guy. At least he has over the years been self deprecating, and he's
aware.
Pretty much aware. He'll come up and bring it up, his stutter and stuff. I just wish they would stop talking. And can Michael Moore? I can't listen to a man's opinion who can't take care of his type 2 diabetes. Dude, stop. Just stop. And it seems to me, like you said, that the left-wing media is so apt to let everybody and anybody talk shit all the time, and they don't understand that this is not a normal time. This is not Obama and Romney walking in and shaking hands and saying, "How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you."
Yeah,
it's not
good faith on any level, right?
No,
none of it
is
in good faith.
This is a bad time. We need to again burn the boats and go for the Biden, or tomorrow or today, get someone else going. But I don't until Biden comes out and goes, "Hey, man, you know what? It's no joke. I'm messed up. It's no joke." When he does that, then I can move forward. But until then, shut up. I was really glad to see AOC just drop the bomb. Was like, nope, this is our dude. Let's go. Yeah. That's what we have to do. And I'm so frustrated. I'm a Democrat, and I've never been more frustrated with the Democratic Party than I have been in this last week.
Right. Well, for the record, this is the Atlantic article this morning. The rebellion against Biden is over. And they wrote "for now" in tiny little type, whatever, which is just dicking around.
Because they're still Democrats.
Because they're still pissing and moaning. It's still, the wailing and gnashing of teeth and the pearl clutching is going on. But This was the title that, and the reason I saw this article this morning is because my mom, who's perpetually on Facebook, saw this in her feed, as most of the women of her generation have just seen this morning as well. Are they going to read the article and see the little "for now" in tiny type with their, with their cataracts and their bifocals? No, they're just going to see the rebellion against Biden is over. And again, one of the biggest things, I think one of the biggest casualties of this whole news cycle from the debate to now, and that Biden's old and what have you, is this previous to that was the enthusiasm gap. Trump would talk about how everybody's enthusiastic vote. Look at all these, now the crowds have been shrinking like shit. I went to the Vegas rally. He said there were 20,000. There were less than 2. It's nonsense. But that's the narrative that's been allowed to carry forward, is that there's this enthusiasm. The Trump voters are excited to vote, and people are not excited to vote for Biden. Doesn't matter. As long as they'll get off their ass and do it, I don't care what the scale is, they're going to by volume. But on top of that, his enthusiasm numbers went up from the night before the debate, which was 29%. Enthusiasm. Biden's number was 29% enthusiasm to 91% this week.
Okay. Well, maybe
91.
Look,
yeah.
There's not a lot of people like us. You and I are constant bitchers, yellers. What the fuck's going on? We're those guys. I think a lot of people. There's a reason that you and I are on stage performing, and there's a lot of people sitting in the audience. Because most people are sitting there going, all right, I know what I'm going to do. I don't need to talk about it because I got to go to work on Thursday, and Phil's just wearing his MAGA hat, but fuck, whatever. And I'm not going to talk about it, so I'm just going to do what I do in the voting booth. I hope that's right. But if that's where are you getting these numbers? Because I've been seeing other numbers. Everyone keeps talking about. And have polls been right in the last 5 elections?
No, they have not. And they've been all over the map. Is what the reason they haven't been right is because there's no consistent narrative. The difference, though, in a couple of these is that they like when they do multi-poll tracking, which is what 538 was supposedly good at, even though they missed 2022, they missed 2020, they were fucked up. Yep, they fucked up on both. They also in the replacement stuff in 2023, they fucked up those as well. They didn't call any of that, which is all Rovember. Like the biggest outlier in all of this, and I don't know, maybe you have an opinion on this, I'm sure you do, on whether it's these Republican housewives who are like, yeah, honey, I'm totally voting Trump and Republican, but go into the booth and go, fuck you, I'm not going to be a second-class citizen in the country.
Yeah, my vagina is my vagina. I'll vote for Trump, but my vagina is voting for Biden.
For Biden, that's right.
But here's what I think. I think the polls are always skewed as technology changed, and none of us stayed with the same technology. Some of us, I mean, literally, the people they're calling their houses. Now, I don't know what the cell phone thing is, but I rarely get anything about polling. So if they're going to the easy technology because it's cheaper and they're just calling landlines, those people are living in rural areas and they're obviously right-wing conservatives who don't see. You know what's crazy to me? I have some hardcore conservative relatives. And I'll bring up stuff that you and I pay attention to in the news every day. And they're like, what? When did that happen? What? I'm like, you haven't seen it? Because they're not. We're kind of psychotic. You have to admit we're kind of psychotic about this. But I also think we know what's coming. You know, if you know history, you should be fucking all over this election. You should know exactly what's going on and I keep pointing out to people, guys, no, it's not going to happen again. It's happened over and over through history. What are you talking about?
Right.
I think the depth of the lack of education in this country has really, really, really come to the forefront in the last couple of years. And look, Carlin went after it. Everybody went after it. But really, in the last few years, I really it's not a joke. People are stupid, and even if they're not stupid, they don't know what's going on, and they have no concept of why what's going on could really end us.
Yeah, well, here's the other thing, too, is that it used to be that you did not have access to the single piece of obvious information. Now that's not the case. Everybody has access to every piece of information. The problem is they're also got access to 50,000 Russian bots and a dude, an ex-cop in Florida who fled the state, now lives in Moscow, who registered 170 fake news sites. The Houston Chronicle fake website, the Chicago Daily, and all these things. And he posts hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles, basically watering down all sides of an argument to make truth vanish. That's the goal. And it doesn't, you can almost forgive people for just not knowing where to turn for the news, because on the one hand, the legacy news media, CNN and other stuff, are, for example, not covering the Epstein stuff, which should have disqualified him in 2015, much less, now, right?
But once we lost, I'm sorry to interrupt, Powell.
Not at all.
Once we lost the fairness doctrine, once we lost that,
right.
And
we didn't lose it. It was taken away. It was
taken
out of the field and shot.
Ailes. You're right. It was taken away by Reagan. And Roger Ailes, his buddy. The Epstein stuff's not going to get covered. That list is extensive, and all those people those people on that list are the people that fucking CEO of all these companies hang out with.
Right.
Like
rely on for money.
They know these people. Yeah. And what people don't understand is the media is now owned by, most of the media is owned by right-wingers, very rich, billionaire people. So, and now because we don't have the fairness doctrine or there's no fucking guardrails, you can see CNN, literally the week CNN got bought, their entire thing skewed. It was the craziest thing to watch.
Right.
And so now what you just said is interesting, is that even I'm to the point now, I watch MSNBC just basically hit themselves in the face with a baseball bat regarding the Democrats this last couple of weeks since the debate. And I'm like, I don't know what I can believe anymore, because you're right. I'm reading, some guy went on my YouTube channel and gave this really long thing. And I went and checked his site, and it's this guy, if you were a Russian, how you would describe an American. I'm a construction worker. I like Camaros. And it was just weird. And I realized as I'm reading his description, oh, you're not from here.
Right. Yes.
You're not from here, dude. It was so bizarre.
And it's gotten so obvious. That's the other thing too. Is like one of the big fears. I do the Friday AI show on Fridays with my buddy Rob Glenn, and we talk about how AI is going to change the world. And I think personally, it's going to be a net positive, no question. However, one of the short-term things is how easy it is to make very real-looking fake news, whether it's fake, deep fakes of something, or just make a bunch of articles and fill up SEO, search engine optimization, for those articles and push it to the top of the talking points to hide something, even if it's just during a news cycle to protect yourself when a scandal is dropping. And Trump world is full of guys running that system. Right. No question. The issue that we're getting to, and very quickly, is that you and I are both kind of coming to the conclusion, or probably have earlier than other people, that half the people we're talking to online aren't even people, much less Americans. Right. And people are getting much closer to realizing that, except for, people in my mom's generation on Facebook who are still kind of, have this kind of naive view of, if somebody's talking to me, they must be a real person. It sounds like somebody.
Yeah, they're still giving people their PIN code.
But that's going away. Security number. Right. That shit is going away. And it's at an amazing clip. And so what it's doing at the same time that it's obviously creating the problem, it's creating its own solution, because everybody's dubious now. Does that mean we can't track what truth is for a while? Yeah, it's hard. You have to double check and triple check shit. But it also means people aren't going to knee-jerk assume that any story comes out. This has effectively killed the October surprise. Dude, we have June surprises now. That's what the fucking... You can argue that maybe this is what DeSantis thought he was going to, if I lose to Trump, I'll head him off at the pass and get him kicked out of the convention and be the nominee, because we'll drop a primary surprise on him. But ultimately, it's 90 days before August early voting starts that the Epstein dump came down. Can you talk about this? You've done more research into this.
I looked at this again, and here's the problem with all of the nightmare of Trump.
Right.
Nightmare of Trump, and it's been going on since 2015. Since that first time that fucking dude came down that escalator, it started. People don't even... Rapists, thieves and rapists. That's what he said. So it started there. And then every day, and I keep this, I always compare it to every day waking up with Trump when he was president was like cutting the red wire on a bomb, which, I would just pick my phone up and go, shit, so explain to me the Epstein dump. We know, look, and here's what I don't get. I don't get why this guy gets a pass for everything.
Right.
He is in all the Epstein's logs. There's messages. We've got pictures. We've got video of them drooling over young girls. And they keep going, you Democrats are pedophiles. I'm like, what are you talking
that's why
about?
though. So I think I don't wear much of a tinfoil hat. I don't believe
I try not to either.
Yeah. I don't believe 9/11 bullshit. I think there's a really good argument for that the Russians put forward the fake moon landing stuff because they were behind and they planted a bunch of the stories. They are the same people, by the way, that created the idea that the CIA created AIDS and put it in newspapers all over fucking Africa to try and kill Africans, basically to try and keep them from not dying from it so they could take their resources. They could send the Wagner group down into fucking Chad and other places to steal their gold. Like, they've been doing that. It's not even a fucking mystery. But in
all the conspiracy stuff, like the chip in your head and stuff like that. I did a bit about it, zero side effects, where I'm like, and I do this whole big long thing about all it would take to get a chip in your head. And then for what reason? Why you? Why? Yeah. What are you picking up? What are we going to watch you pick your kids up?
Yeah. And you have a phone in your pocket, you dumb motherfucker. They didn't even have to talk you into it. They sold you a chip to carry around in your, and it's better than
with a laser from space. You give them a locator, you son of a bitch.
The early adopters, you could argue that they were trying to make you stale. Fuck fluoride, right? Well, put it in their pocket next to their balls, and we'll get rid of the population that way. Like, there's so many dumber, easier versions of ways to do this. They're gonna fuck
exactly.
Even the vaccine thing. Okay, so let me get this straight. The vaccine is an attempt to kill off all the people on the planet. You're going to get the vaccine and it's going to kill you. This is the narrative that they want to go. They're giving you this so that you can't procreate and you die. Okay, what's easier? Getting people to allow you to put a needle in their arm, or just creating a pathogen and releasing it and letting it kill people?
Right.
On an efficiency scale, if you're trying to wipe everybody out, and then who are you actually killing? So let's say you don't want to kill every person on Earth. You just want to kill a select group of people. Which group are you going to kill? The ones that will line up and get a shot because it's for the betterment of society and stuff? Are those the people you're going to kill? Or are you going to kill all the red state dumb fucks who are like, I do my own research and I'll shove fish tank cleaner up my ass? Right. Those are the people you would wipe out. If you're an elite group that's trying to purify the human race, that's the sperm you're preserving. What the ever loving fuck?
It makes no sense. Well, it's hard to spread the pathogen because the chemtrails they're booked. They're booked with all that other stuff. Those claims are booked. It's hard to get. We got to kill all these people first with this chemical, then we can start over.
Sure. Touche. Obviously, you've thought this one through, and I appreciate it. But so, what do you do though? If you're Mike Flynn and you're being paid by Russia through Turkey, not even a question anymore, and
or you're at the table with Putin. He was visiting. He was on vacation
with Jill Stein together.
With Jill Stein. Like, what do you guys? But that's not a conspiracy. No one ever brings that up. Why?
Right. And by the way, not even a conspiracy theory. Like, they're there at Putin's table. You don't get to sit at Putin's table. That motherfucker brooms people out of his security detail if he thinks they're not on the team because he's so paranoid someone will kill him. But he totally feels safe around Mike Flynn, a U.S. military officer. What the hell? So anyway, what do you do if you're going to run a dude like Donald Trump? And he's been a fucking scumbag his whole life. Right. You do two things. You get out ahead of the story. You spread, news where everybody's a fucking scumbag, right? So it's really it's a wash, right?
Yeah.
And then you also...
They all do it. How many times have you heard that?
That's right. And then you attack the news for being fake. And then the third strategy, the third leg on the stool is you attack your opponent as exactly what you are. And so when they respond to it, it sounds like they're just doing sour grapes, right? They're just going or it's childish, right? So
I've noticed it twitching a bit because again, it's now been going on since 2015. I have noticed, the one thing that comics get, and we travel a lot, is I get a weird, my own internal poll that I take every night on stage, across the country. I'm going to Omaha this weekend. And you get this weird, and you can always tell by which jokes. Like if I do a couple of Trump jokes, it used to be like people get mad. Now you do a couple of Trumps, everybody loses their mind and claps. Now it could be my audience, that's fine, but it can't all be my audience.
No, because you're not touring like I'm on the Sexy Liberal Comedy Tour, so I expect a certain amount of clapter, right? And right. But
I think people are waking up, and it's taken a long time for people to wake up to the fact that whatever Trump says, you're pretty sure he's doing it. Whatever Trump says, you're pretty sure if he says the Democrats are this, pretty sure he's doing it.
Yeah.
And when he started talking about it's already rigged. I mean, how do you rig a grand jury of citizens? How do you rig a jury of people that were picked and they're trying to protect their identities because they might get killed by one of his crazy supporters?
Right.
The system is kind of unriggable with a jury in a way.
Right. And when it has been in the past, somebody's been able to pay off a juror, whatever. It's usually an external. It's the guilty party that's engaged in that stuff because it's harder for it's nearly impossible for the state to rig a jury. And oftentimes, even when somebody goes to jail for a crime they didn't commit or whatever, it wasn't part of a conspiracy to just put that person away. It was either blinders on the parts of the cops and the DA. They didn't have another possible person. The guilty party, maybe they didn't kill the person, but they'd been beating her for years. So there was this idea, like there's a whole thing, there's a perfect storm that has to happen for a lot of these to occur.
For it to actually work, Yeah, and
none of that has, when you're the mob, you drop off bags of money and you get busted, at some point. So Trump's thing is, let's just go to the election.
Okay.
Somebody, according to Trump, he got in against the deep state in 2016, right? Hillary Clinton picked by, whoever, the Illuminati or the Pentaveret, and put in place, right? She's going to be the fucking person. And he beats the deep state, which would prove that the deep state doesn't exist, because if they're actually the deep state,
or they're just really lame. Like I keep saying this, people go, guys, if it's the deep state, how the fuck is this guy still walking around?
Right?
The deep state,
like Alex Jones. Like if the Illuminati's real, if the Illuminati's real, Alex Jones is a dead man 20 years ago in a helicopter crash that he never even bought a ticket for. It's just fucking dumb. But on top of that, so he gets in.
Guns would be, if the deep state worked, we wouldn't have mass shootings anymore. If the deep state worked, it would all be over. You morons.
Yeah, it would. They would, and again, if all they want to do is make money and all this kind of stuff, a lot of this chaos bullshit that Trump represents fucks with the bottom line. It kills you at the base. It kills off your audience. It's a huge distraction that keeps. I mean, you could argue that if Hollywood wanted anything, like if they were part of some elaborate scheme, you can effectively, the mass shootings, especially Aurora, Colorado, drove people out of theaters well before COVID did. That the number of people, because people don't want to sit in a fucking movie theater, some dumb fuck behind them is going to open fire while they're enjoying a fucking movie, right?
Right. So the liberal elite shut down their own billion-dollar business. Okay. It doesn't. None of it makes any sense. None of
it. You scratch the surface and it's all fool's gold. But on top of it, this is the part that's bugged me the most, I think, of all the conspiracies, is that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump by Joe Biden and the Democrats, who were, according to him, out of power at the time, and he was president of the United States. So let me get this straight. The Democrats, who apparently are like herding cats and can't get their message straight for decades. You and I have both been clamoring about the fact that they can't even work out a single bumper sticker. But somehow they managed to fucking pull the tablecloth off of Trump's table and leave all the settings in place while he's president.
While he was president, he was just wandering in the White House going, "What's this one room that's locked? It says deep state on the thing."
Right,
How come I can't get into this room?
He's over there with a fucking coat hanger and a fucking bobby pin.
Like there's one room in the White House, the deep state room, that Trump just didn't have the key to. If the deep state worked,
and if they did,
that's the answer. Because that's the answer to the guys. Like deep state, go. I'm sorry, he was president.
He was running the joint. His DOJ was running things.
Did the deep state want to run up $7 trillion in debt? Did the deep state,
right?
I mean, want us to be standing in fucking parking garages in Pomona getting injections in our arm? Is that what the deep state?
Right.
The deep state is run by some real fuck ups. If that's the deep state.
Well, and we both know also, for the record, I am the deep state. I've claimed it.
I knew it, see?
Yes, I am the deep state. I may not hit bottom, but I'll scrape the shit out of the sides, and that's, I think, enough. But the deep state, phrase is just a repackaging, a reboot, a Maxim / Rockstar energy drink revamp of bureaucrat. Because back in the day, it was the bureaucrats run everything. These career politicians and their appointed people that are in the bureaucracy of the federal government. That's what we heard about in the 70s and fucking 80s. But bureaucrat isn't scary. Deep state sounds like the Illuminati, so they fucking grab that. My question is, and this is the big one, if let's say you take what Trump said, you believe it, and that Trump had the election while he was president stole out from under him by private citizen Joe Biden, who had not been in political office for 4 fucking years, and he had it stolen from him then. What fucking chance do you think he has this fall with Biden in office with his hands on the levers of all aspects of government and apparently legal immunity to do whatever the fuck he wants? What?
Right. That's the setup. See, here's what happened.
Okay.
Though Trump appealed to the Supreme Court, right? It was really Biden wanted him to appeal so he could get the ability to kill Trump. That's what's happening now. I think we're done with this podcast. I think we
settled it. Yeah, right. Done and done. Ladies and gentlemen, that's ChristopherTitus.com. He'll be in Oklahoma this weekend. Don't forget to check out his podcast. Yeah.
It's weird though. Like I talked to my relatives, and a couple years ago we had a fight. Like I was angry because I can see. I think because I read it every day. I've got my podcast. I listen to yours. I'm on it, and then recently I've just started asking questions like this. So people, when you're in an argument with your relatives this summer, just go, well, explain it to me then. Yeah, just explain it to me. How is Trump? How did they take the election from Trump when he was president? How is that possible? He ran it. He ran the whole thing to the point where he was actually putting troops on the streets to break up protests. To the point he was actually stopping Ukraine from getting weapons. He was running. There's no wouldn't the deep state want to continue to fight Russia? Wouldn't explain to me how? And it's weird to watch them. My wife's sister is her husband's huge on the right wing. Literally works for a think tank, and I have some issues, but that's my wife's sister, so everything's fine. And I've asked them, I sat down with them and talked about immigration one day, and at one point, I kept asking him, explain it to me, explain how they're doing that, and he just got redder and redder and redder and angry because they don't have an answer. No. It's easy to stay with the magic, the trick, not explain the trick. Well, explain the trick then. And they can't explain the trick, and then they get frustrated. And I think there's this weird humanity thing about, do you realize that if they admit that we were right, they'd have to admit they were wrong? And I always go, yeah, but then you get to be right. If you admit you're wrong, you get to be right now. Yeah. Well, think about Menendez or Clinton and the Epstein stuff. I think both of us are and by the way, there's a profile in the Atlantic that was done about Jeffrey Epstein. And I think Epstein's a good measure of waking up to something across the board and realizing, wait a minute, what the fuck, that a bunch of people did. And some people like Dershowitz and Trump himself did not do. They were like, oh, I kind of like him more, or I always knew, and let him get away with it. There is, if you read the Atlantic story, Clinton's explanation that other people say, Clinton told me about this guy and he said this about him, secondhand and directly from Bill Clinton at the time, this is before he gets busted, right? Are all about how he
offered his plane up to fly people to Africa to fight HIV/AIDS, and that he's tied in with Harvard, and he knows all the professors there, and he's very interested in science and physics, and he wants to move America towards a greener, Epstein talks the talk.
This is Clinton. Is this Clinton's
what he said, or did not only Clinton's direct conversation about, when they asked his people about a statement about Jeffrey Epstein back then, but also other people who were introduced to Epstein by Clinton. This is how they described what Clinton had said about Jeffrey Epstein. That he goes,
he was so basically the story was he was a philanthropist that was helping out fix
right. And so every description, Jeffrey, this is one of the quotes, Jeffrey is both a highly successful financier and committed philanthropist with a keen sense of global markets and an in-depth knowledge of 21st century science, Clinton says through a spokesman. I especially appreciate his insights and generosity during a recent trip to Africa to work on democratization, empowering the poor, citizen service, and combating HIV/AIDS. Now, knowing what we know about the Epstein flight logs, that's Clinton early on admitting that he was on this plane, not trying to keep it on the down low, none of that shit. Okay, take what you will. But if either one of us found out that he went to Little St. James and engaged in all that shit, I would have no problem jettisoning entirely.
Yep.
I would not care. The minute that came up, I'd go like, fuck that guy. It wouldn't mean what I liked about what he was selling me as part of his presidency, his economics or his, strategic stuff for the country was wrong. He just sold me a bill of goods and you a bill of goods, and behind the scenes was doing something fucking awful, right? I don't have a problem.
Democrats,
right.
When someone is a scumbag, we're like, nah, that guy's a scumbag. We don't
right, like Menendez. And we're ready to move on. Yeah, fuck that dude. And we're ready to move on immediately. And again, and I don't know why, but Jon Stewart came to Anthony Weiner's defense, and the rest of us were like, what are you doing? Why? You know what I mean? You don't have to jump on his back until it all works out, but it's odd to throw yourself in front of that fucking bus. Meanwhile, same article, same profile they did in the Atlantic is the quote that we all hear about Epstein from Trump, which is he's a terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be around. He likes women on the younger side. That's how Trump was talking about him at the time. Clinton was saying, here's a guy who spends his money helping causes, and he gave me a flight to Africa, and he came over there, and we talked about democratization. That's how he discussed him. Trump just blew right past it and went like, yeah, he likes chicks, man. He likes them on the younger side, let me tell you. And on the same article...
And we have video of him leering at girls with Epstein as his buddy.
Right, and saying something... And you know this too. As a comedian, you'll appreciate this. Whatever he says to Epstein makes Epstein do the "I'm embarrassed to be laughing at this" double over.
Yes, he does that.
That fucking look. That's not a joke I should be laughing at. I feel bad.
It's this. Ready? It's dude.
Yes.
We're like you're. Yeah.
What would you have to say? What the fuck could you say that would make Jeffrey Epstein do a laugh of embarrassment?
You made a Sith Lord uncomfortable and awkward.
Yes. How did you peg his fucking awful meter that quickly with less than a sentence?
It's a good point. It's a really good point.
It fucking boggles my mind.
The Epstein dump. So we were talking before.
Yes.
So go over the Epstein dump a little bit with me because I want to hear because I've honestly got to a point, and we were watching the news last night. My wife, and she just goes, "I'm so tired of hearing all this. Can we just turn it off?" And it becomes. What's happened to America is we went through a fucking pandemic, we went through a lot of shit with this dude, and we're all tired. We're all tired.
It goes back further than that. It goes back further than that. Dude, we are, and as a fellow Gen Xer, it's one of the reasons why I shrug off the end of the world as often as I do. Because we've been through the end of the world dozens of times. My whole fucking life, it's been ending. My whole fucking life. We came into our sexual awareness as teenage boys with AIDS jumping onto the headlines. Welcome to the end of the use of your dick, 16-year-old Hal Sparks. Right?
I watch my dad sleep with everything that walks, and then I got told no,
and I get fucked. Right, it's my now I've got a fucking right. Okay, so and I've got it like fear death around my penis for the rest of my life. Like, fuck you. And then on top of that, like LA riots, I was there for that part of it, but it was, that was indicative. 90s crime wave, you can stack that. They were kind of linked in together as far as a story of
gang wars.
Unraveling colors, all that, the unraveling of American culture, crack and Iran-Contra, and you can't trust the government anymore, and blah, blah, blah. 9/11, 2008, COVID, and arguably, I think the trauma of the Trump presidency, even for maggots who thought it was going to be an awesome ride and have been burned and triggered more than we have by the entire thing, right? We've been through a bunch of this shit, right? And I think...
By the way, just so you guys know, go to Christopher Titus TV. I did a special called Zero Side Effects.
Yes.
And literally, I apologize to millennials because we have been so up their ass about, you guys don't know how life works. And then I went through this whole thing of what they've gone through. Look, we went through it too. I didn't even think about, we started with AIDS, but they were so fucked. So this whole, I did a whole
we were just,
this.
you and I think I'm a little older than you, but I'll be 55 in September. And I'm old enough to remember like my first political awareness coming from watching news reports about how Nixon had stepped down while it was probably during the Carter administration. They were running stories about that part of it, while finding out later that Reagan had negotiated with the Iranians and exchanged arms so that they wouldn't release our hostages until after the election to make sure Jimmy Carter doesn't get reelected, which, by the way, shows you that like what Trump was trying to do. Everything about Trump is a fucking reboot. There's no original ideas at all. He even brought back Bill Barr, right? who protected George H.W. Bush by getting his journals excluded to protect all the guys who were in Iran-Contra, because there was evidence in those and he got it excluded, right? So, and that's why
there is a deep state. So you're saying there is a deep state?
No, I'm saying there's a thread of people, especially on both sides, both parties have loyalists and long-term plans. And those people, every time they get in power, they try to bring those people back in to start righting the ship. And the American electorate thinks the country is a speedboat instead of a cruise ship, and every 2 years goes, why isn't everything fixed? And you're like, because if we yank the wheel the way you want us to, we'll careen into a fucking retaining wall and die, dummy.
Right. Well, this is the problem with, I think this problem with COVID is that like things, people don't, it almost feels like a dream, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everything got turned around so fast. The economy started booming so fast. Everybody got hired, and people were like, you know what? Like I was watching something on Jon Stewart last night, and one of the reporters was talking to 6 black people, half like Trump, half didn't. I'm like, how can you like Trump? And they're like, well, Biden's, keeps using black people. He's not really doing what he said he was going to do. And I want to go, what the fuck are you talking about? We've got the lowest black unemployment ever. Worse, it's lower than Obama. What are you talking? And it's
narrowed. Between the uniform unemployment, there's always been that gap, and it just rode right along in parallel, just worse, right, than everything else. It has narrowed during Biden, which is the fucking point.
Equality.
Otherwise, you're not affecting. You're not affecting black unemployment. You're just affecting overall unemployment if it just kind of tracks in parallel. You're only helping that group if you fix the gap, right?
Yeah, but you like the guy that says, "There's my African American." You like that guy,
right? Okay. Yeah.
But so things got so good so fast. People don't. It's weird. People don't. Some people don't seem to know what's coming. If Trump gets elected, we're fucked.
Yeah.
Like they don't even understand it.
I think a bunch of them. I think a bunch of them do actually, and I think a lot of them are have been tricked into that bait of like appearing like they're considering all sides of things, because there's this idea too that the extremes have gotten such a bad rap, and well earned, on both sides of the aisle, that people fear being even perceived as part of an entrenched loyal group. I don't. As a Democrat, I'm totally cool. That doesn't mean I'm aligned with either extreme in my own party. I think that's the cool thing about being in a big tent. But Republicans, it's either MAGA or die.
Yeah.
right? You get death threats if you're not MAGA. So it's hard to get a read. It's like when they take polls of people in Gaza and how much they support Hamas. You're like, yeah, you're doing these polls with the barrel of a gun. It's really hard to get a bead on what people really think, for fuck's sake, right?
Yeah, that is a tough poll that didn't really follow.
How do you feel about Hamas? Right, great, super, just wow, and I'm sorry.
They're my guys. They're my guys.
Yeah, my stomach growled when I was speaking, but I want you to know that I was agreeing as my stomach wanted to pipe in and say, thanks for saving me from myself. Carbs are a killer. Motherfucker. So, yeah, I think...
This is why I like you, Hal. You're willing to go as dark as I want to go. Yay. Yeah, this was the bit you were doing. I'm so happy.
And that's you inspire me, sir. I must say, you inspire me to go that extra mile.
Give me some Epstein stuff. You've gone over the logs and stuff. What do you think about all
so there was one of the big stories was Trump shows up in the flight logs, but only a couple of times, only twice, and it was just back and forth from Florida to New York, and that was it. We now know he was there. He's in the flight logs over 13 times. Beyond that. And this is, I think, what drove me down the fucking rabbit hole about this, because he's not only in the flight logs. There used to be this story, and it's very pervasive. Glenn Beck tells this bullshit story all the time, and it's a fucking lie. And the story is that Epstein and Trump had a falling out because Jeffrey Epstein was hitting on underage girls at Mar-a-Lago. That was like the daughter of one of the big donors or members, and Trump said "fuck that" and cast him out, and he was shunned, he was canceled, he was driven out of M. Night Shyamalan's village after that. Okay, let me just state unequivocally that is bullshit, because for years later we just saw in the dump. Trump was calling Jeffrey Epstein in 2004 on the fucking regular, right up till he married Melania, who, by the way, was introduced to him by Brunel and Ghislaine Maxwell in that crowd. Like she was. So what it looks increasingly like is that Trump, who likes big tits like any mama's boy, did not like him as young as Jeffrey Epstein did, but Jeffrey Epstein would break girls in for people like Trump. So you want them 19, 20, and they'll do what they're told because they're scared for their life, or they don't have a way out, or they're so fucking broken. I'll break the ponies for you. That's basically what Epstein did for those folks. And it's fucking gross. So well after this apocryphal story that he kicked him to the curb, we know that they were hanging out all the time. So what actually happened was, you remember that story about that piece of property that Trump bought for chump change and then sold to that Russian oligarch for $90 million, and the dude bulldozed it? Okay. Do you know that there was a bidding war over that property? And do you know that the other person on the end of that bidding war was Jeffrey Epstein? And that Jeffrey Epstein, they were back and forth trying to get each other kicked off the bidding live on the phone, and Epstein drove the price of that property up another $10 million. Costing Trump $10 million on a piece of property they both were going to sell after they bought it to this Russian so he could launder some money through them. They both had the same financial point. The price Trump was able to, because he had more access to cash, liquidity, bought it, but he always blamed Epstein for costing him $10 million. That's what the pissing contest, this is what it's all about. Had nothing to do with this idea that he was protecting women. And by the way, that's not even a good story if you're like, yeah, he stopped this when he went after a girl at Mar-a-Lago. He was horrified, but he was fine with the dude pilfering the high schools and middle schools in the area. Like, why is that a good story at all? Fuck you. But it isn't even true. So we now know, because of the dump, because there was always this idea that that happened and they never talked again. Well, we now know he was calling him almost every other day. In 2000, for years after.
Are you saying that there was a story that Trump said that wasn't true? Wait, so you're saying that Trump said something that wasn't actual fact?
Well, no. Here's the thing: Trump has never sold that story because he knows it's false. That was a myth that popped up I don't know where the impetus for it came from, because it's not true and it's fucking
like his handlers, like the guys that were on his side that were trying to help him.
Yeah, it sounds like something like Ghislaine Maxwell would come up with herself as a way of like distancing herself later. None of that is even remotely true, and so it sounds like a PR stunt, like a myth that you just float to clear your name as best you can. Yeah. The problem is
the more bad information we get out there, then even the good information looks bad.
Right.
The more bullshit we put out there, then everything looks like bullshit.
Right.
And that's what they're hoping for.
Well, here's the one part of all of this that where I did go down my own little rabbit hole about this shit this morning, and I posted it because there's this article from the Daily Beast in 2017 about this an article about an article that in 2000, in the year 2000, there was Rupert Murdoch started a golf magazine that lasted a couple of years, which was Maximum Golf, which is just so like Maxim and golf. It's so on the fucking nose. And it was like a titty golf magazine. And there was a layout with Melania in it. And it was just stupid. Anyways, it was, I mean, obviously on the nose, just designed for assholes like Trump. And they did a huge story on him, right? One of the first issues was this like great story about Donald Trump, right? And what a great golfer he is and all this shit. Well, when was the article written? Well, they had the author of the article catch a ride on Trump's plane from New York to Palm Beach on his way to Mar-a-Lago and to golf and to talk to him about golf on his private plane on the ride. And the plane was late taking off. And they were holding. Why were they late taking off? Well, they were late taking off because Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were late arriving to the plane. This is from the article. This is what I posted earlier today. In 2000, Corcoran, who's this guy who was writing the article, was a guest on Trump's 727 that weekend, and he wasn't the only one. The article published in Maximum Golf magazine, which is just, again, the fucking...
Yeah, Golf Titty magazine, which is my favorite pitch ever, but go ahead.
Absolutely right, sure. Notes Trump had to wait at Marine Terminal for now disgraced pedophile billionaire Jeffrey Epstein and his society gal pal Ghislaine Maxwell, who had since been accused by dozens of women of running what was called a sex slave ring. Corcoran, who didn't know the pair at the time, remembers Trump standing in the doorway of the plane yelling to them, "You broke the cardinal rule, Jeffrey. Never be late for someone else's plane." Though not mentioned in the article, Corcoran now recalls a young woman boarded with him. I honestly couldn't guess her age, but she was young, made up to look a bit older. He says, adding that nothing untoward happened during the flight, unless you count child sex trafficking. Obviously, he didn't want
transporting a young girl across state lines.
Yeah, typical Matt Gaetz shit. So that story, by the way, kind of floated by and has now gotten new attention because the dump of the flight logs. One of the things I've been saying for a long time is the idea that people rode on Epstein's plane. But what about when Epstein rode on other people's planes?
Right.
Where are the Trump flight logs?
All the guys, because many of the people on that Epstein list fucking had planes.
Yeah. And
it's not just Trump.
Yeah, they're like, did he ever fly to Little St. James Island on Epstein's plane? No. Did his plane ever land in St. Thomas and take the helicopter, which is how most people got there, including Alan Dershowitz?
Yeah.
Yeah. It fucking well did. I guarantee Donald Trump's plane, a couple of them have landed at St. Thomas at least a half a dozen times.
Man, that would be an interesting. You are, wow. That is, it was good knowing you, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I know scarier people than Trump does, so I'm good.
Good. We have one of my brother-in-law works is HSI, and he's in the basically they break up pedophile rings. That's what they do, and that's what he does. And I've heard stories, man. All these dudes. What I don't understand, is that this is the worst of the worst. This is the worst of the fucking worst shit you can do.
Agreed.
That this man is still polling at all. That he's not in prison. stuns me, man. They keep talking about every time he says that I'm being attacked, I'm being falsely accused, my entire life is being tore up. Motherfucker, you're still in your plane. You're still flying around. You're still going home. You
don't have an ankle monitor on. You're not. Look, okay. The other big thing I keep pointing out, and I don't know why that got dropped as a talking point too, which it should have been hammered like shit since the idea of it happening, was Alex Acosta gave Jeffrey Epstein his sweetheart deal that gave him a key to the fucking jail. He was allowed to let himself out for work. He had to report to the jail to sleep, but he could also leave if he had work in the middle of the night or he had to fly away. He never spent a night in jail during that entire time, and he continued to sexually assault underage girls that whole time. Right? Alex Acosta negotiated that deal and the non-prosecution agreement going forward. Remember how that Hunter's sweetheart deal that they were going to have a non-prosecution thing? Okay. Alex Acosta actually did that with Jeffrey Epstein, which was, by the way, why when Jeffrey Epstein died in jail or whatever, that he was never going to be convicted on any of this stuff. He was going to walk. Yeah. Jeffrey Epstein was going to go to jail, get out on bail, fight it in court, and live as a free man, because that non-prosecution agreement had been struck and was legally binding by Alex Acosta. Now,
it was legally binding after when Jeffrey Epstein was in jail the second time?
Yes, it was a federal agreement.
So and also, listen, he fell. But I will say this is that, look, you got to remember, Trump knew Putin since '87. So there's been a way these guys, if you, and telling me, no, man, they just like Trump. I go, no one likes Trump. No one likes
Nobody.
Trump.
He has no friends.
Got so much.
He has no friends.
Since '87, he's been saving this shit on people, letting them stay at Mar-a-Lago. It's the Putin playbook, man. If you have enough evidence on anybody, and Epstein has everything on everybody. Okay, all right, here's another thing. We've talked about this on my podcast. What happened to all that evidence that the cops left after the Jeffrey Epstein raid? There was hard drives, computers, but they left it because it wasn't on the search warrant. It wasn't listed. Well, I talked to my brother-in-law. He said, well, if that was the case and we found it was on a search warrant, we would have a guy standing there.
Yeah.
And we would go get another search warrant and get it on the list.
Absolutely.
But everybody just left, though. And my wife goes, why? And we were talking on that podcast. I go, because if Jeff Epstein was internationally trafficking for these big shit things, how do you protect that? You go to the DA. You go to...
Oops. Shit. Lost you for a split second. Obviously, the Russians attacked us during that moment.
Yeah, see, right there. It's Halen Titus talking again. That can't happen. So, if that's the case, how do you protect all these big people? You make sure that you bring in the smaller fish in the local government and the local law enforcement.
Yeah.
You bring them in too, so you have some protection. That's my theory, anyways. And I still don't know.
I'm glad you brought up the '87 thing, because most people don't know that the very first time Trump went to Moscow was on July 4th of 1987. He spent July 4th in Russia making a deal with the Soviet Union. This isn't even after Russia fell. This is straight up KGB shit. Like, he stayed in the hotel that's full of bugs exactly across from, like, all that shit. Yep. So one of the things from that Atlantic article about Epstein, which is one of the one from that we know from the quote that Trump said about him being a great guy. One of the other parts that stood out to me, I'll read it because it's hard to read on the screen for you, whatever. It says, friends of the two say that Maxwell, whose social life has been a higher octane than Epstein's, lent a little pizzazz to the lower profile Epstein. This is, again, before he gets arrested, when they're doing a puff piece on him. Right. This is when Trump kisses his ass and calls him a lot of fun and young girls and all that kind of stuff. And Clinton's quote is like, he cares about AIDS in Africa. Indeed, at a party at Maxwell's house, her friends say one is just as apt to see Russian ladies of the night as one is to see Prince Andrew. This bitch was hanging out with Prince Andrew in her apartment, which, again, she spent a bunch of time at Epstein's place as well, helicoptering in Russian hookers. She flew her own helicopter. Again, another thing where she could throw the fucking flight logs into the river. Yeah, Epstein is frequently seen around town with a bevy of comely young women fucking hell. But there has been no bold-faced name to replace Maxwell. You may read about Jeffrey in social columns, but there is much more to him than that, says Jeffrey Leeds, the private equity firm Leeds Weld. He's a talented money manager and an extremely hardworking person with broad interests. Most unusual, though, is that his media-obsessed age, he is not any... In this media-obsessed age, he is not in any sense a self-promoter. Yeah. He's fucking...
So the guy who's supposed to be this big money manager, everybody else is, except the one guy who... You don't want to be like, yeah, I'm trafficking girls too, everybody. Can I get people on the phone and Us Magazine? I want to get a profile done on this.
Right.
I got a question for you, though.
Yeah.
So when it comes to this, and because we didn't really land it, I think that this entire time...
Yeah.
That the reason Epstein got because there was no visible means of support for Epstein, right? There really wasn't.
No. Well, Les Wexler was his primary. Les Wexler was his primary money dude in there. And by the way, in the background, I just want to introduce Philip Ittner, Christopher Titus.
Chris, a big fan. Yeah. Love the stuff you're doing. Love the podcasts. You guys are great.
Thanks, man. That's nice of you to say, man. That's really nice. I always think that nobody listens to it, but thank you.
You got a fan all the way over in Kiev, Ukraine. Somebody who's passing the time, even when I don't have electricity. I'll occasionally catch your podcast.
And dude, thank you for being over there, man. I can't. You always know things are going really bad when our media stops covering it.
Yep.
Yeah. I was a CBS producer. I was a Al Jazeera reporter. I worked in the big networks for years and years, and I knew what they were going to do here. And I got offered jobs, and I turned them down because I knew that the next shiny object was going to pull them away, and I knew that they were only going to cover things on the surface level. And this is way more complex than you can explain in a 2-minute, 15-second report that you put at the top of the evening news.
Right.
And so I said, fuck it. This is way more important. So I said, I took the skill set from those 30 years and started applying them here. I don't have the largest audience in the world, but I get to appropriate them whenever I can.
You have to want to do that, though. You must have the adrenal gland of Tony Hawk and Travis Pastrana. That's crazy that you.
I've covered wars. I've covered wars for 25 years. I was in Iraq. I was in Afghanistan. I've seen my fair share of war. I'd hoped to be retiring, but this is far more important. And I was on Maidan on Liberty Square in 2014, and I had these two little old ladies. I'll never forget it. These two little Ukrainian little old ladies came up to me because they knew what was going to happen too. Right. They knew that the world would eventually turn their eyes away. Right. And in 2014, these two little old ladies came out of the shadows of the protest on the Independence Square, and they just begged me with tears in their eyes, saying, don't forget us, please. Don't turn your back. Don't turn away from us, because we know what the Russians are going to do. That was 2014. Yeah. And so I said to these two little old ladies, I said, okay, I promise. We were all crying. And I was walking up to the hotel with my Polish cameraman friend who works for ABC. And I said, what the fuck was that? These two little old ladies are accosting us on the square. And he said, think about what how old do you figure they were? And I was like, I don't know. It's hard to tell. 80s, early 80s, something like that. And he said, think about the lives those ladies have lived and being in Ukraine and living under, they probably saw when they were very, very young, the famine that Stalin imposed here, and somewhere between 4 and 7 million people died, like a quarter of the population.
Where Voldemort from Harry Potter gets his name
by the Holodomor. Right. Yep. Yes, actually, that's true. And they were probably young children then, and then they lived through the Second World War. We always think about the Second World War and the Eastern Front being Russia. It actually wasn't in a lot of ways, except for a couple of border areas of the Russian Soviet Republic. Most of the fighting actually happened here in Ukraine and in Belarus. So they lived through the Second World War. Then they lived through the Soviet era of getting the KGB knocking their heads anytime they talk, they speak out of line. And Ukraine has always been this place where the Moscovites have kind of pushed down. So he says, think what those ladies had their lives. And I just went, well, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for putting that on me.
I promised.
Good job, man.
I promised.
Listen, I know what you're going through is tough, but I got to do Fridays. I know what you're doing is tough, but I got to do Friday second show in Omaha. So we're on the same level.
Yeah, it's the same.
I feel you.
Let me,
that's
Phil,
rough,
I'll bring you in
Omaha,
1 second.
Oh.
Yeah. Where you can count on people when the going's tough.
Hey, Hal has my contacts, Chris. If you ever want to have me, on to talk about this stuff,
we do.
My only goal is to try and keep this on the radar, because it's a lot of shit's going to happen this year with the election, and that's important. But this is important too, because it's all tied together. It's all tied together. Putin and Trump and the Russians and Ukraine and all of it, it's all mixed in together. So if you ever want to have me on, Hal knows this 100%. I will shamelessly appropriate your audience.
Yeah, right.
If that's what I have to do. If that's what I have to do to keep people thinking about this place.
Yes, but if people don't understand this, they don't understand that if Trump gets elected, Ukraine falls. If Ukraine falls, Putin keeps rolling. If Putin keeps rolling, NATO gets involved. If NATO gets involved, we are in World War III. People don't fucking even understand the math of this. And all you got to do is crack a history book. Oh, but in America, we don't teach history anymore.
Well, at least Florida. Hold right there, Phil. Let me give a proper goodbye to Christopher Titus. ChristopherTitus.com. He'll go see the second show in Oklahoma.
Friday.
It's
breaking new material. I'm on the joke mining tour. All new material. I'm going to out Carlin in this one. I'm so tired of how the world is. I'm uncorking. Thanks for having me on. And dude, we will talk on my podcast.
I love it. Yeah, safe travels. Really appreciate you. Thanks for being on, and we'll do it again.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Cheers. There he goes. And ladies and gentlemen, if I may, there we go. I'll let him go. Yeah, there you go. And then I got to copy this link and bring in.
I'm shameless. I'm shameless. I'll do that. The drop of a hat. I'm like,
I'm with you.
Let me steal your ear for a second or two, because this shit's important.
Yeah, of course it is.
It is. Especially this week.
So here we go. 3, 2, 1, and it should pop in just a second. And I want to remind everybody you're watching House Parks Mornings, Megaworldwide. Like, subscribe, give it a thumbs up, support the show, share it out if you would. These episodes become a podcast, so you can follow that as well through the machinations of podcastery. And but let's just jump right in. I was mentioning to him as well the sort of arc of this Biden freak out. I called it almost to the hour. But this is the story on Axios Scoop. Biden rebels in Congress see their revolt crumbling. The Atlantic has an article that says, where is it? I'll find it up here that Biden, where did he go? Here it is. The rebellion against Biden is over. That's it. I mean, that's how it's working here. Thank God. Yeah. It's dying a dogged death, to quote Kristi Noem. But I will. And by the way, Andrea will pass on your info to Titus so he has it so he can get you as quickly as possible.
That'd be great. That'd be great. He does a very good. He does a very good podcast. It's different than what you do or what I do, or we all have different hats. Texas Paul or Boston Brian. Everybody has a different hat. Or Tom Hartman doing. I continue doing his stuff. Everybody has their own flavor, but the more of us who speak, I think the better. So if I like Titus's podcast, and if I can get access to that I know he's had Paul on a couple of times recently. So if he wants me on from Kiev, I have no shame. Especially when we're pulling children's bodies from rubble.
Yes.
And
so catch everybody up on the attacks recently. The attack on the hospital.
Well, Yeah, it's disgraceful that I have to. This should be front page news.
Right.
This should
Agreed.
be the top of every single news. We were pulling oncology patients, infants, children,
Yeah.
child oncology
There's a row of them
out of
across the
rubble.
street with no hair, wearing hospital gowns. Just a horrifying image, and a huge, huge shrug from CNN over here.
Nothing. Yeah, next to nothing. You know, I saw you talking about MTG in the I don't know if she was in the dais or somewhere
Yeah.
talking about the NATO meeting, and I was like, bitch,
Yeah.
we are pulling children from rubble,
Yeah.
and you are pissing on the Ukrainians,
Right.
and you are blaming the Ukrainians for this conflict. You know,
Yeah.
and then what happened was just okay. So folks haven't heard again um, a major fuck up. Glad we're not on the radio. A major
Yeah.
fuck up by the news because they're not here. The news is not here.
Yeah.
Western news is not here. Um, uh, on Monday, we were hit by a very severe attack, primarily, significantly by cruise missiles. And one cruise missile, 30 out of 38 were stopped, but that still means, you know, here in the capital, I think we got 6 hits. These are 1,000-pound warhead missiles, approximately. And one of them hit a hospital and hit the section of the hospital with a separate center for care that was one of Europe's largest cancer treatment centers for children, for young children. You know, there are reports of doctors who had a 2-year, a 2-year-old child
Mm-hmm.
a 2-year-old child was on their operating table, and this fucking thing came in, and these doctors covered the opened, you know, operating wounds of the child with their own bodies from the dust and the debris that was falling. And you tell me that Russia is not a fucking terrorist state.
Right. And one of the first
So
children
we had a national day of.
Yeah, there was a kid named.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there was the first child that was killed by the Akhmedet attack was a boy. They transported him to another hospital, but he died on the way. That was the first person who died from that hospital, was a little kid. Again, the Mirror is posting stuff about this. The British media is doing a pretty good job of pointing it out. Certainly, you know, with your help, you know, I'm drawing attention to it. Some folks that care about this, including some of our oddly fellow travelers on, you know, what would be traditionally the right side of this stuff. There's some what I would call.
It's hard to defend killing children.
Yeah.
It's hard to defend killing child cancer patients, for fuck's sake. Where's the military asset in that? And it's not far from where I live, man. On Monday, you know, it's about a less than a 5-minute drive in urban traffic.
Yeah.
It's right up the road for me. You know, what the fuck military asset? And then the Russians and their surrogates start trying to diffuse it. They're trying to send a different story. They said it was basically a Ukrainian Patriot missile, air defense missile, that went awry and hit this hospital. There's a guy who does military analysis online, and a Patriot missile has about approximately a 40-pound warhead. It's meant to knock out incoming missiles or jets. It is not a huge explosive warhead. The Kinjal hypersonic missile, which hit this thing and I think we can categorically say that it did, has about a 960 pound. So a 960 pound warhead on it.
Yeah.
It's a cruise missile.
Yeah.
It's meant to destroy infrastructure. It's a bunker buster in a lot of ways. That's it right there. That's right.
Yep. That's a picture
And
of the
you had
missile
guys
as it's
who
hitting
are-
the hospital. That's it. It was.
Yep.
They have it on film. They have it on
Clearly,
video.
you can see. Yeah. And also, before I go into the specific examples, like the idiots, the fellow travelers, and the people who are bought and sold by Putin and the Kremlin, or the Kremlin's own statement, say at the UN. Before I get into that, the cynicism
Yeah.
of saying that the Ukrainians hit their own child's oncology center,
Yeah.
or because they're not saying that this was like debris. They're saying that they staged this.
Right.
That this was a purposeful Ukrainian hit on its own oncology hospital for children.
Right.
I have seen a lot of things in my life. I have covered wars for 30 years. And I know there are horrible things that people can do to one another. To say that the Ukrainians would do this to a hospital of children suffering from cancer is to display a level of cynicism that has no concept of what is happening here in Ukraine. This country is one of the most unified communities, places, countries I have ever experienced in my life. Mm-hmm. They are unified. They are standing side by side, brother, shoulder to brother, sister to sister, all the rest of it, standing side by side, shoulder to shoulder. They go crazy. So there was a controversy about 4 or 5 months ago where a guy was caught stealing money from uniforms. He was taking money and food, and he was skimming off the top. Dude was pilloried. Dude, the calls for him to be thrown into a deep dark cell and all the key thrown away was overwhelming in this country. Do you think, for even a fraction of a second, that if it was revealed that Ukrainian armed forces shot this missile into its own hospital, that the trust, the solidarity would be destroyed in a heartbeat? The risk to reward ratio is non-existent. Do you still have me, or I seem frozen? It seems.
No,
you can
you're
hear
good.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're good.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, but you get my point. You get the point I'm trying to make here. You first off, you don't understand Ukraine if you think that they have it in their capacity to do that to a children's hospital in Kiev.
Right.
You don't understand what's happening here. Well, and you don't understand human. I've seen human beings do horrible things to one another, but this, no, right. I don't buy it for a heartbeat, because it's, what if it gets out? What if it really does? What if it lets, for a fraction of a second, entertain this crazy idea that the Ukrainians would do this to themselves? It would shatter everything if it was discovered. It's not worth
it.
The risk.
Right.
It's
not,
exactly. So
there was no gain.
True.
There's nothing to gain from it.
There's no gain. What would you gain? The world community, the West, is very much on Ukraine's side already. Yeah. They don't need to do stuff.
NATO is already meeting. They don't need to be talked into this
NATO is already meeting to talk about. That's right. Then you look at their track record. They have hit hospitals repeatedly. Think about the maternity ward in Mariupol at the very beginning of this war. They've hit hospitals repeatedly. They hit a hospital in Dnipro, I remember, maybe about a year ago.
Yeah.
They don't care about hitting hospitals. It's not a problem for them. So there's that. There's the track record. So there's the cynicism of not understanding the solidarity and the sense of unity within Ukraine. There's not understanding, that risk to reward. They're not taking into account the Russians' track record. But then you see this asshole at the UN, Russia's representative at the UN, saying, well, if it had been us, it wouldn't have been. We would have leveled. Everybody would have died. We would have. We are so awesome and powerful in our
Right.
military might that if we really wanted to kill children in a cancer ward, we'd kill every single one of them. And I'm like,
Right.
dude, what? That's a that's a that's a flex. We
Right.
could kill more children if we wanted to. What the fuck? No. And then finally, you go to, the Jackson Hinkles,
Yeah.
the Jimmy Dores. I'm sure Jimmy will at some point make some bullshit about this if he hasn't already.
No, he's avoided insofar as I've seen, and this might just be in clips. I don't know if he didn't bother to clip it, but he has avoided the attacks on the hospital. I think just because he's, for a lot of people, a terrible source to start with. So there might be a predilection. Oops,
Hal had on a guy for that.
Hold on, wait. I don't want to. Hold on. I don't want to. Yeah, it's Titus' stuff. I don't want to butt dial us while he's having a conversation. That would be unfair to him. So I'll hang up on him so he can do that. But he was just. It's good. He's discussing you, and that's important.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not kidding.
People.
I'm not kidding. If I can get on, I'll get on.
Yeah, absolutely. So
we got to keep this. I
have not seen him pull. Right, I have not seen some of these folks pull clips of this. There is definitely here's I think the crucial point about this is that before Russia attacks a children's hospital, which they have every intent of doing, and they don't really care. And they believe that's their right to do it, and it shows how tough they are and all that shit. On top of that, when they do it, along with it is the plan to blame it on the Ukrainians or the allied countries or on the U.S. or on any of that, right? They preload this stuff with the idea, because if you don't give a shit, then all bets are off. You could produce any. You don't even have to have one story to cover it. You can have 20, and you just dump them everywhere. This sort of like chaos news concept has been the driving force behind them for a long time. So now it's ahead of the game. They're like, we're going to hit this hospital, and we'll dump 3 or 4 stories, so all the right people will just pick whichever story they like the best, because none of them are true, and just run with it, and their own particular listeners will just sell whatever the fuck.
Yeah, and I got a buddy of mine here who said he thinks part of the motivation for this was actually the NATO summit,
right?
Because it was a way to show the West,
the Indian premier.
We are awful. Yeah, well, and Modi too. Yes. Yeah, Putin really stuck Modi in it. But for my buddy's point that he was making to me yesterday was that, and I don't know if I agree with it 100%, but his point was that by showing how awful we can be as Russians, by like, we are scary. Be afraid of us. We have no limits. There is no awful thing that we will not do. Mm-hmm. When we conduct war, this is how we conduct war. Be afraid.
Yeah, that's it goes with that whole like mutual assured destruction and the nuclear stuff. Message. Right. Is that we'll use them because look how awful we are.
We'll blow stuff up. Yeah, look how awful we are. We are not afraid of escalation. We are not afraid of doing horrible, horrible things, because we're big and mean and nasty, and you should be afraid of us. Yeah. But that was the message that they were trying to send in the run-up to the NATO summit, so that, like, the NATO delegates, primarily the U.S., by the way, because it's Sullivan in a lot of ways who's been the most reluctant. Like Kelly I saw talking about, like, oh, we're afraid of escalation, speaking to a Polish news organization. Like, dude. But the point that a lot of these guys are saying is we don't want escalation. And that kind of behavior scares us, because if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to kill cancer patients, child cancer patients, you are willing to do some scary, awful shit, and we better be afraid of escalation.
Yeah, but the problem with
That
it
was
is,
my
and this is,
point, and I think there's some validity to it.
I do too. I think there's some validity to that. I think the
I
problem
don't
with
agree.
that calculation,
I don't agree
though,
100%.
yeah, I think the problem with that calculation, it'll scare all the right people. You know what I mean? It'll scare the dumber people, not the people who are actually in power, but the people who will put pressure on those people. Maybe they won't stop support for Ukraine, but they'll slow the roll, which is what all Marjorie Taylor Greene and her ilk have managed to do, is just slow the roll. That's clearly the point. It is a bluff, but as James in our chat is saying, but it's absolutely a bluff that's fairly easy to call. I think the problem with it ultimately is that, and they've used mutual, I've said this for a long time, but they've used mutual assured destruction as an umbrella to protect their conventional warfare in every way, because they go, if you don't let me murder this person, I'm going to kill us all, is the psycho defense in a situation, in a hostage situation. I'll blow us all up if you don't give me a helicopter. That idea is what they're using effectively. At one point, though, if you're not a true believer, if you're a hedonist like the Russian oligarchy is, nobody buys it long term, because you don't want to die. You're not an Islamist waiting for their 72 virgins. You're not a white supremacist willing to die for the cause. And you're not Waco. You're lying. You don't want to go down with the ship. You're trying to sneak out like Yahweh Sinwar from Hamas, right? You're like, we will all die together, and you've got a tunnel that directly takes you out of Egypt. So that's where it dries up. But again, it can convince the people who don't drink from the fire hose of news like we do, who aren't up on a lot of this shit, right? And who specifically are like, this is going to lead to World War III. This is going to lead to a nuclear war.
Glenn Beck.
Yeah. Again, hedonists themselves.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's their point. That's why they do it. That's why the Russians do it. And, look, you do have to walk a fine line. And this is where I get into arguments with my Ukrainian friends and colleagues, because my Ukrainian friends and colleagues, understandably, are saying, like, give us, like, everything that you have so that we can just crush the Russians, that we can just blow the hell out of everything. And the response from the West, and in particular America, is like, we have to walk a fine line.
Yeah.
Because while we cannot, and I think we are being too cautious, that's my personal opinion, but I do understand where they're coming from. If you go from 0 to 60, the Russians will freak out. The Russians will do something stupid and crazy, because maybe it's a bit of a machismo kind of thing. It's like, if you really did show us to be the paper tiger that we are, we're going to have to overcompensate and do something crazy.
Right.
I do understand. I see that in the Russian, especially after the humiliation of the collapse of the Soviet Union. I mean, Russia wants to restore itself to being a great global empire, and so if we just outright dismiss them and go, hey, or like hell, we could go all the way and be like, hey, Ukraine, as part of our agreement in Budapest, here are your nukes back, because the Russians,
we didn't protect you like we said, which was the terms for you to turn them over.
And that was the deal. That's right. So here are your nukes back.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy talk. That's crazy talk. That's not realistic. And I think that as you go further down the equation of where you don't want to tip the scale, I mean, like, if we gave them a lot of hardware that we could give them, that would make Russia's armed forces their lives very, very difficult. But then we would be pushing Moscow to have to respond. So I'm not a fan of incrementalism. I'm not happy with the way that has gone, but I do understand the fear of some sort of massive escalation that would lead Russia to have to do something crazy in response. Having said that, we can do things. We can give them the means to fight for them. So I think following this war crime, and it is a war crime.
Yeah.
I think the possibility of saying, you know what, use the tools that we have given you how you see fit, and if that includes striking deep into Russia's infrastructure, those are your tools. We have given them to you.
Right.
They're in your hands. Do with them what you, but these limitations on like hitting Russian airfields where these
Right.
guys take off, where the cruise missiles were dropped from, because the cruise missile doesn't launch generally. It is dropped from an aircraft, or it is launched from something, naval. Um, we can't hit the airfields. Ukrainians can't hit the airfields. That would deter them from having these
Well, I think there's
jets get in the air that can shoot the cruise missiles. That needs to change.
Yeah,
in my humble opinion.
I happen to think that there is more of a danger in us picking any targets than just allowing the Ukrainians to, at this point, to do what they want. Because the problem with anything that gets hit, it tacitly has our approval. If we go, don't hit this, then that means anything else we have given a green light to, and they can use that as a manipulation point. So I think what you do is you give them their stuff, and you go, look, we're supplying them, they're fighting the war their way, and we are agreed with them that this is an illegal invasion by Russia, and what they need to do to get out of it is up to them. And because they're Russia's neighbor, they're the ones who will be damaged first by a lot of this stuff, right? So I feel like you give them that room to do what they're going to do because you're saying hands off. We're not telling them to strike the Belgorod, fuel centers and stuff like that. They're choosing their targets. We're just giving them what we think they need to protect themselves. And again, nobody seems to be pushing back on the fact that Russia is launching strikes from within their own territory. They are firing missiles at Kiev from inside Russia, well inside the country, not even in a disputed zone of the country, not just in the LPR and the DPR, not just around the Crimean Peninsula, not just around areas of the Black Sea where they have ships. They're firing shit from deep inside Russia to deep inside Ukraine and into the western side of Ukraine. So fuck off.
Yeah. And the horror of it is that Ukraine can see these airfields.
Yes.
And they can see aircraft
stuff leaving
on the tarmac,
right,
loaded to bear to fly either into Ukrainian airspace or to just get right outside of it and drop the cruise missile. And then we get then we get pummeled, we get overwhelmed. And when, Ukraine, if it had the means, could hit the airfields that are 200, 300, whatever miles inside Russia. But we have said, you can only strike this far, you can only strike using these weapons. The kid gloves have to come off. We're pulling babies out of rubble. Screw this. It's over. We need to. And look, so far the Biden administration and what I have been hearing out of the NATO meetings is that they are focusing on air defense, so that even if the Russians do put jets in the air with cruise missiles, that Ukraine will have the means to knock those cruise missiles out of the air, and we won't have a repeat of Monday. All for it. Yep, great. Let's do that. But then, in addition to that, let's not tie one of their hands behind their back. Give them the means to defend themselves, but then say, "Oh, this limitation and that limitation and the other limitation." All of that has to go out. That has to go out the window. And if Monday is what it takes, then. But I mean, look. I want to circle back to Monday because this is big. This was so egregious. This was so. I mean, this city right now is still is shocked. It's stunned. You can every interaction I had yesterday and today. Was just people are. I mean, they're just wrecked. This was such a horrible, awful attack. This was so horrific. That the people right now, I think, are still stunned. It is turning towards anger. It probably overwhelmingly already is. I mean, you saw this poor girl, this Ukrainian tennis player, on the courts at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
And she should be concentrating on representing her country on one of the greatest platforms for the sport in the world, and by in so doing, raise awareness for Ukrainians.
Yeah.
But there she is getting into the quarterfinals, I believe it was on Tuesday, and she couldn't hold it together because this is an evil, and it's the cruelty and the suffering of these people. When we could do something about it, we could stop it. We could make it so that the dying stops here. But
Right.
then you hear idiots like Marjorie Taylor Greene thinking that if we just stop supporting the Ukrainians, it'll drive them to the peace table. With an enemy that kills children in their oncology hospital, for Christ's sakes, how can you negotiate with an enemy like that? That's willing to do that. Do you think they're gonna stop? That we got to get our head out of our ass. It's time to recognize. Well, it's a long past time to recognize that either I spoke to General Ben Hodges about this at the very beginning of On the Edge. We have to decide whether we want the Ukrainians to win or we just don't want the Ukrainians to lose.
Right.
Those are two very different things.
Well, I think there's also
I argue we want the Ukrainians to win.
I agree. I think there is most of the debate around that is what that entails. And obviously the best case scenario is driving the Russians out entirely, reclaiming Crimea, and that's that. And which would ultimately lead, as we've all been talking about the fall of Putin, because nobody would live with that. Nobody, the Catherine the Great reference you've made before, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. The others are this belief that maybe there's a segment of the LPR and the DPR that they want to keep. Right, and they let them have a piece of that, but we keep Crimea and most of the territory, and then they go about rebuilding all the land they do keep. Any of the money they make in that area, farming, mining, any of that stuff goes to rebuild Ukraine. And then in the future, if they don't if Putin's replaced and somebody comes down there, then they argue and file a case with the International Criminal Court or whatever for the illegal seizure of land and yada yada, and they get it back. Right, these kind of that secondary strategy. The reality is, though, is that the Russians are entirely bent on wiping the Ukrainians out. It's on their TV shows. It's not. It's their equivalent of Sean Hannity is on television every night saying nobody should be speaking Ukrainian and we should be nuking Berlin at some level of reference. We're not dealing with people that the same people thought they were dealing with previous to this attack, post 2014, or even previous to 2014, right? The lie is gone. Yeah. And
no, they want their empire back. They want their empire
and they're
back.
Not going to have it.
They're not going to have it. They're not going to have it. You're right, though. There is a scenario where they get to keep the land bridge. They get to keep Crimea. The West forces Ukraine to accept that. Mm-hmm. And it only, I think it only encourages them to go further. Maybe in 3 years, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 50 years, who knows? But Russia covets this land. This is the cornerstone of their empire. And if they don't get it out of their head that the age of empire, the age of the Russian Empire is gone. It's done. It doesn't exist anymore. Until that is removed from their psyche, their national psyche, by either a humiliating defeat in Ukraine, which is a military victory that pushes them back to 91 borders, or whether or not it's some serious introspection that they do after that defeat, or the loss of Vladimir Putin when he is expelled and dealt with, however he's dealt with, because this is too humiliating a defeat for any Russian leader to survive.
Yeah.
One way or the other, Ukraine will never be safe as long as Russia maintains an imperial mentality. And they haven't changed at all in, whether it's Tsarist Russia, Imperial Russia, or the Soviet Union. That idea of we deserve these lands because, we've been attacked in the past. So for us to feel safe, we have to, control these lands. Oh, and by the way, we are the great, Christian Orthodox,
and that I think
third
there's an
Rome,
important,
and we deserve to be expansionist.
Yeah, I think there's an important aspect of this too, is that previous to the last decade, maybe there was this idea that we're never going to change. This is who Russia is. This is the identity, and going forward, we're going to, by hook or by crook, we're going to make this happen. The problem is that the way societies have been moving lately, and I think the elections in France and in England have pointed in a certain direction, is that there's kind of an all bets are off aspect of sort of the and even what's going on in China right now, for better or worse. Murder season's in, there's a huge parade of people running people down or stabbing them to death, but also it's a reaction to that the CCP does not have the clamp down on people that it thinks it has, and these revenge against society attacks are driving people to turn on the government in a way that they would have feared to do 10 years ago, 8 years ago, even 6 years ago, right? But now they're not scared. In the United States, it means we got a lot more assholes online. But in countries like Iran and China and places like that, it means people are more willing to take up arms against the circumstance around them. And also aren't willing to just kind of settle back into being subservient to Islamists, dictators, monarchists, communists, whatever the overarching,
whatever shade of autocracy.
Yeah, whatever it is, it's not it. The future is not going to look like the past, because we're moving swiftly away from a resource economy. We're moving much closer to a renewable economy and an idea and technology economy, and that's been happening for a long time. And the people who've been hanging on to it the worst, from the Saudis to the Russians to the Chinese, are staring down the barrel of their own demise, either through diminishing populations or collapsing industry or the Chinese housing market, or Russia doesn't create anything except oil and gas, and they can't even sell that shit anymore. So that at a certain point, the people, even the people with a sense of history in this country that's off kilter, like Josh Hawley and these folks who believe in Christian nationalism, they're having a real hard time selling this bullshit to everybody, even if they believe it's the last grasp of MAGA over here or whatever. It's not going anywhere. People are blowing it off. They're just not that easily, yeah.
That's the tricky thing about that old American experiment. It's pretty enticing.
Yeah. And it's really resilient. It's much more resilient to this kind of shit than autocracies are. You really have to clamp that shit down.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's right. Yeah, because everybody's, about giving people the vote and giving them a legal, system that actually does have, where justice is blind. Mm-hmm. That's appealing, and that's far more appealing than having an autocracy where, if you're with the in crowd, if you're with the powerful and the influential, everything's great, but everybody else is screwed. And look, Western liberal democracy, until we can figure out a better system, it's really the best choice we got. Because if people don't want to live under autocracy. I have visited and traveled within autocratic systems for a very, very long time, and people don't like it. They really don't. They might accept it. They might kowtow to it. They might even try and get in good, so that they can personally benefit. But generally, our system is better.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I know people don't like categorical statements. Our system's better. Our system, liberal democracy, when it works, when it's done properly, and when it has strong, invested citizens who are making intelligent, reasoned decisions, with a fourth estate that actually functions, and all the rest of it, that's a strong society.
I'll go one further. I'll go one further, because we just went through
involved.
We just went through our one term. You're welcome very much. Of America's Hitler, according to J.D. Vance, right? That the United States put a dude in power who has no morals, no underlying principles whatsoever, is bought and paid for, is morally for sale in every situation. Put every sycophant and suck up and scumbag he could find in charge of very important areas of our government, and we shook him off like a bad case of fleas. And it's going to take a while to kind of broom some of his bullshit. But look at, the countries that have had autocrats in them. Took them decades to broom out the Pol Pots. And when those people when they get a hook in that shit, we've been really good. And it's partly because it's built into our system of a limit of 8 years no matter what. We've got, an ability to broom those motherfuckers in a way that other countries cannot. And even when it's bad, it works better.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the one aspect of it that I'm afraid of is there can be circumstances where you cross a line and it's harder to step back from that line. Whether it is civil society and the way that society and culture can be corrupted by certain unscrupulous elements, or whether or not, and I don't think this is going to happen, or whether or not blood starts flowing, because when blood starts flowing, then then it's tit for tat.
I would argue that's when our system ceases to function, and what really goes into play at that point is a form of like low-level tyrannical autocracy, because that's what all these Civil War motherfuckers are trying to sell, is the idea that we can do mini autocracies. That's one of my biggest problems with the whole the blood of tyrants and patriots or whatever watering the tree of liberty and the fucking guns. Is that we need our guns in case the government comes after us, because a tyrannical government is a terrible thing. Well, most of us aren't worried about a tyrannical government because we don't have that problem. We have a ton of checks and balances in our government, from a state, local, from how you're treated in prison, all kinds of shit. But what we don't have is protection against a tyrannical neighbor, somebody who has military level weapons and can decide in an afternoon that they've had enough and they're going to exert their own little mini autocracy on the fucking mall or the movie theater or their old, place of work or their ex-wife's house. That's the tyranny most people are worried about in the United States. The tyranny of little brother, not big brother. Yeah, well, and let's hope it stays that way. I mean, look, we need to, also recognize that, in a lot of ways, our independence came out of the chaos of the English Civil War, which was a century before our revolution. But a lot of what built up the colonies was the fact that a bunch of, in the English Civil War, a bunch of guys dug in their heels and said, no, this is the way things are going to be. And it led to, a massive shock to the system, a lot of bloodletting. And, the founding fathers built this system so that instead of taking to the streets and having the occasional violent revolution, we work it out in our legislature. Right. Yeah.
We work it out civilly. Trust me. I've been to a lot of wars. We don't want a war. We don't want another civil war. All these guys, this idiot who was talking, I forget his name, but this fight that's making the rounds of this guy saying, we're in the middle of a second American Revolution if the liberals just let it happen.
Yeah, it'll be bloodless if the liberals let it happen. You're missing
the point.
Right. That's what he said. That's why people took it as a threat.
You have no concept of American democracy.
No.
Right. And then secondly, guys who idly make threats of civil war, that's why I made it about a third of the way through this recent movie, this Civil War movie, about, war journalists in America, which actually wasn't about American Civil War. It was more about war journalism. It was still rubbish. Anyhow, regardless, if you haven't been to a war, we don't want a war in America. We do not want a second civil war in America. This romanticized ideal of what a second American Civil War would look like is horrific. You have no idea, if you haven't been in a war, all the things that it does to you, all the things that it does to your family, to your daily life. You know, it's it's not something to be toyed with idly. War is a very horrible, serious, catastrophic turn of events. And that's why it is better for us to work this out on the Hill or in our legislatures or, in the ballot than it is to pick up weapons.
Yeah.
We start picking up weapons in America. Firstly, Americans have no idea what a war would look like. You don't want it. Trust me, you don't want it. The first time things start blowing up at the Walmart or at the Cubs game,
Right.
Americans are going to go. I firmly believe that were that to happen with a bunch of nutters trying to stoke some sort of second civil war,
it's not going anywhere.
Something goes boom.
Yeah.
The vote.
We've had that before. Again, we've had
majority of Americans are going to go
dozens of these motherfuckers.
I mean,
like Jim Caviezel, I think did that. One of my favorite Denzel pulp movies is the Tony Scott movie Deja Vu. I love that movie. I've watched it dozens of times. It's one of the few time travel movies that I find doesn't break its own rules and holds it together. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but Caviezel, who's turned right wing and all this shit.
I don't know if I have.
Yeah, he plays a character who's a guy who blows up a ferry full of civilians and Navy personnel.
Yes. I have seen that.
And he has this whole fucking monologue, when he's arrested, about how the Tree of Liberty and anybody's willing to sacrifice. And Denzel's character in it has a great line. He goes, "Who sacrifice who? Me? Her? You don't mean yourself, right?" And that's a big part of it's why he's the perfect example of the MAGA post Timothy McVeigh types, because Timothy McVeigh didn't park the fucking truck there and stay there and trigger it when the person he was trying to get came out of the building so he could take it with him and make a big splash. He parked the fucking thing, set the timer, and left because he wanted to live. He wanted to be a hero in the new order that he was setting up. He wasn't sacrificing himself. He was very happy to sacrifice white children for the white war. He was that kind of person. And that is very different. And that's why it's much more aligned with the Russian style of doing stuff. Very different than saying, than somebody in a suicide vest or somebody who's willing to, kamikaze a flight into a building or some shit like that, right? It's a very different mentality. And it also affects your impetus to actually pull it off. There are a lot more would-be Timothy McVeighs who don't want to die. They want to survive and make it. And none of them believe they're going to now. You might have had that illusion that you were going to get away with it in the 90s, right? That you could sneak off and D.B. Cooper your way through live in Argentina with some leftover Nazis and then run America when it falls, or believe fucking Helter Skelter back when you were, hanging out with Charles Manson. But not now. That's not how anything works, motherfucker. And their own sort of chaotic conspiracy theories about what kind of weapons DARPA has, what kind of space rays and Jewish space lasers and all that shit that they believe exists, that also keeps your troops down who might stand next to you in some of this bullshit because they think everybody's got a goddamn chip in their head. I'm not going to stand up against the other. They'll shut my chip off. It gets so dumb that you kill your own argument.
Alex Jones is not going to be on the front line.
Yeah, no, never. No. Every one of these motherfuckers is going to die of diabetes-induced, slovenly behavior or heart attack caused by an overdose of chocolate cake and red wine. Cirrhosis, yeah, absolutely. Or lead-lined dick pills giving them a perforated frontal lobe.
Everybody who can hear my voice, everybody who is watching this podcast or watching this stream, you don't want a war.
No,
you don't want a war.
Yeah, don't.
Damn it. No, you don't. You don't want things like this. You don't want your life stolen away from you. You don't want your friends, your family members, your loved ones putting their lives on hiatus. That's the
Agreed.
slightest
And
thing
and
that can
I
happen.
would
You don't want them dying. We
agreed.
don't
And
want
that
a war,
includes
guys. We don't
nope.
want to. That cosplay crap that Alex shows, flippantly throwing around Civil War. These guys have no idea what
No
they're
idea.
talking
I would
about.
like to
They've
say
never seen
I know we
They've
got
never heard a
like
shot fired in anger.
no. And if they have, it's domestic violence. I would like to say, Phil, I know we got another like 3 minutes or so with you, but I would like you to go seek shelter and do your thing. And I want everybody to remember that On the Edge is got a new episode every Sunday, or practically every Sunday. There's another one coming out this weekend, and we will see you on Saturday.
Well, we're hopefully have another one on Sunday because of the incidents on Monday, and then the day of mourning following. The person who I had intended to interview had to postpone. So we're still hoping that we can get an episode out on Sunday by filming it on Friday and doing a quick turnaround. Because of this horrendous event on Monday and then the day of National Day of Mourning yesterday, we had to postpone. So
Gotcha.
I still intend to get an episode out, but it's beyond my control.
Sure.
I mean, it's a result of the attack on Monday. So
we'll see if Titus is available.
Me, everybody. I mean, these things happen. And I'd love to get access to his audience and shamelessly. But yeah, folks. By the way, as I sign off, this happens a lot. It is part of life here. I don't like it. Nobody likes it, but nobody should also be freaking out. I'll be fine.
All right, excellent. But be sure to subscribe to the podcast and listen in.
Go get my helmet.
Yeah, go. Yeah, put your helmet on and be safe. And we will see you on Saturday. Thank you so much.
Thanks, bud.
All right,
we'll
cheers.
talk then. All the best, everybody.
Yeah, appreciate it. There he goes. He needs to go seek shelter because that's. I know he's he's our Phil and he's tough about it, but it's a serious situation. They're not fucking around, and they especially now because they've been hitting Kiev harder. So luckily, as Biden announced the largest air defense donation to Ukraine since the beginning of the war. He announced that at the NATO gathering, the summit yesterday. So I feel like they have enough right now, and they will have even more. But good Lord. And on top of that, can I point out something else? And I think this is worth pointing out because of because again, Phil will play this down, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate his dedication to this and his willingness to look past the danger and be there and talk about this. This is let's take this up here. Here you go. This is a little piece of there you go. Since 24th of February 2022, 91 media reps, that's reporters, camera people, editors in buildings in some cases, but mostly people who are out in the field, 91 have been killed in this war. On the Ukrainian side, I don't even know what the story. I mean, they've lost mill bloggers and stuff on the Russian side, but half of those were killed by Russians themselves, so it's hard to keep track. And 30 of them have been captured by Russia. Ukraine's Culture and Information Policy Minister Rostislav Karandiv reported this. 91 killed, 30 captured. Honestly, the idea that our media looks past this all the time and doesn't, when one passes or one is captured, doesn't make a bigger story out of this, is in and of itself, I would argue, a violation of their duty as news tellers. So, anyways, we all keep our fingers crossed for Phil, and I will continue to worry about him, as I'm sure many of you will. But until then, until we talk to him again on Saturday, hit that like, please, 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 please stand up for what we're saying here. If you believe it and you're on our team. If you're a maggot, by the way, thanks for showing up and helping us. Trolls, we really appreciate you. You push us out into the reeds of the algorithm in a way that we could not possibly go on our own. But those folks are specifically like, hold on one second. It is important that we are moving ahead with Biden as the nominee. Period. End of fucking story. Hemming, hawing, blah, 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 done. Gone. It's beyond discussion. Right? Like it or not, that's what's happening. I happen to like it. You don't have to, but that's where we are. Also, there is no movement where Donald Trump is going to be replaced at the head of the ticket, even with this ginormous dump of Epstein material, which I posted some of and will continue to be posted all the way up to Election Day, because fuck that guy and fuck everybody associated with him, even if I previously thought they were good and they turn out to be part of that shit. Goodbye. I personally am voting for the only one of the candidates that didn't fly on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, or didn't have Jeffrey Epstein fly on his plane, which we now know Trump did. So take care of yourselves, take care of somebody else, and I will see you guys this afternoon. Whew. Hit that like if you would, everybody. And thank you guys for the super chats and the support today. Patreon.com/HalSparks. Think about it. If we could double our Patreon numbers, it would change the very nature of how we can do the show. And that's what it will take. We're about 1,000. We have a bunch of free people, so it's more like 700. But if we could get, even 1,500 people to join the Patreon and stick with us, it would change the nature of the show. So thank you guys so much, and thanks to everybody who super chats us and supports what I'm doing here. Bless you. Also, somebody said, hold on, how Tristan Snell posted on Instagram that there are 76 pictures of Trump with Epstein, none with President Biden. Yes, and I have Tristan Snell's book. My mom just read it because Tristan sent me a copy of it. Yeah, good stuff overall. I think it's The Case Against Trump, But there we go. Yeah, and you get a free comedy show every month if you're a Patreon. So much love to you guys, and I will see you later.